What did your school illegally do? My son Nolan started showing up at home with unexplained bruises. He was 13 and in his first year of special education due to his autism. When I asked him about the marks, he'd just shut down and start stemming, rubbing his hands together until they were raw. I tried talking to his teachers, but they dismissed my concerns, saying he probably got them during his episodes. But Nolan hadn't had a meltdown in over 2 years. Something wasn't adding up. One day while doing laundry, I found dried blood on his shirt collar. That's when I bought a tiny voice recorder and sewed it into his jacket. I know it wasn't legal, but my gut was screaming that something was very wrong. What I heard that night made me physically sick. The special ed teacher, Mrs. Walsh, had been locking Nolan in a 4-4-foot calm-own room, basically a storage closet, whenever he had trouble focusing. She'd leave him there for hours, sometimes the entire school day. I could hear him crying, begging to be let out, saying he needed to use the bathroom. Mrs. Walsh would just laugh and tell him to earn his way out by completing worksheets in the dark. The next recording was worse. When Nolan had a panic attack from being confined, 2 male staff members pinned him face down on the floor. I could hear him struggling to breathe as they pressed their knees into his back. "Maybe this will teach you to behave," one of them said. I stormed into the principal's office the next morning with the recordings. Instead of being horrified, she threatened to have me arrested for illegal surveillance. She even smirked and said, "No one would believe an unstable child over respected educators." So, I went to the school board meeting that night. When it was my turn to speak, I played those recordings on full volume. The room went dead silent, except for Nolan's recorded cries. Parents started crying. Board members looked like they were going to be sick, but the district's lawyer jumped in again, threatening legal action against me. They tried ending the meeting early. That's when Thomas Parker, a local news reporter who had a son with autism, stood up. He'd been there doing a story on school funding. "I've heard enough," he said, pulling out his phone. "This airs tonight, at 11 I, and I've already sent copies to 3 other stations and the Department of Education." The school board tried to offer me hush money, $50,000, to handle this privately. I told them they could shove that money where the sun doesn't shine. The story exploded. Other parents came forward with similar recordings. Turns out the calm-down room had been used for years. They found scratch marks on the inside of the door from desperate kids trying to get out. Mrs. Walsh was arrested for child abuse. The principal and 3 staff members were fired. The district had to pay millions in settlements to 26 families of special needs students. But the best part? The state passed Nolan's law requiring cameras in all special education classrooms. My son testified at the hearing, the same unstable kid they said no one would believe. He's 15 now and thriving at his new school. Last week, he gave a speech at a disability rights conference, standing ovation. The only one not clapping was Mrs. Walsh. She was watching from prison on Zoom as part of her rehabilitation. My son Nolan started coming home with unexplained bruises. He was 13, in his first year of special education because of his autism. When I asked about the marks, he'd shut down, stimming and rubbing his hands raw. I spoke to his teachers, but they dismissed my concerns, saying he must have gotten them during his episodes. But Nolan hadn't had a meltdown in over 2 years. Something was off. One day while doing laundry, I found dried blood on his shirt collar. I bought a tiny voice recorder and sewed it into his jacket. I knew it wasn't legal, but my gut screamed something was terribly wrong. That night, what I recorded made me physically sick. The special ed teacher, Mrs. Walsh, was locking Nolan in a 4-4-foot calm-down room, a storage closet, whenever he struggled to focus. She'd leave him for hours, sometimes the whole school day. I heard him crying, begging to be let out, saying he needed the bathroom. Mrs. Walsh laughed and told him to earn his way out by completing worksheets in the dark. The next recording was worse. Nolan had a panic attack from being confined. 2 male staff pinned him face down on the floor. I heard him struggling to breathe as they pressed their knees into his back. "Maybe this will teach you to behave," one said. I stormed to the principal's office the next morning with the recordings. Instead of horror, she threatened to have me arrested for illegal surveillance. Smirking, she said, "No one would believe an unstable child over respected educators." That night, I went to the school board meeting. When my turn came, I played the recordings. The room went silent except for Nolan's cries. Parents cried. Board members looked sick. But the district's lawyer threatened legal action and tried to end the meeting early. Then Thomas Parker, a local reporter with an autistic son, stood up. "I've heard enough," he said, pulling out his phone. "This airs tonight at 11, and I've sent copies to other stations and the Department of Education. The board tried offering $50,000 hush money. I told them where they could shove it. The story exploded." Other parents came forward with similar recordings. The calm-down room had been used for years. Scratch marks lined the door from kids desperately trying to escape. Mrs. Walsh was arrested for child abuse. The principal and 3 staff were fired. The district paid millions in settlements to 26 families of special needs students. The best part? The state passed Nolan's law requiring cameras in all special ed classrooms. Nolan testified at the hearing. The same unstable kid no one believed. He's 15 now and thriving at his new school. Last week, he gave a speech at a disability rights conference and got a standing ovation. The only one who didn't clap? Mrs. Walsh, watching from prison via Zoom as part of her rehabilitation story. 2, my wife called me to a meeting with HR. "Liam, after 15 years, we're restructuring your position. My boyfriend will take over from here," she announced smugly. "Clean out your desk by Friday." I smiled politely and said, "Completely understand." They had no idea how Monday would be fun. Chapter 1. The Betrayal in HR. The conference room smelled faintly of burnt coffee and cheap carpet cleaner. HR sat uncomfortably on one side of the table, papers neatly stacked. My wife sat on the other, smug smile plastered across her face. "Liam," she began, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "After 15 years, we've decided to restructure your position. My boyfriend will take over from here." I glanced at the man sitting next to her, the new replacement, who smirked like he'd already won. "Please clean out your desk by Friday," she added, her tone almost gleeful. The HR rep cleared his throat nervously, clearly aware of the tension. I smiled politely, not forced, but calm, steady, almost amused. "Completely understand," I said, because the truth was, while they thought they'd cornered me, they had no idea the trap they had just stepped into. Monday, I thought to myself, is going to be fun. Chapter 2. The Forgotten Clause. I walked out of HR that Friday with my box of things. To everyone else, I looked like a man defeated, head down, quiet, resigned. But inside, I was smiling because, unlike them, I actually knew the company bylaws. The hidden power 15 years earlier, when the company was still small, I hadn't just been an employee. I was one of the original contributors. And with that came something my wife and her boyfriend had completely overlooked: founders' shares. The contract was ironclad. My shares couldn't be revoked without a buyout, and any major restructuring required unanimous approval from founding members. In short, they hadn't just fired me. They'd broken corporate law. I spent that weekend in my lawyer's office sipping coffee and reviewing documents. "Liam," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "They walked right into this. On Monday, you don't go back as an employee. You go back as their boss. The setup. I didn't call my wife. I didn't warn her. Instead, I let her spend the weekend celebrating with her boyfriend, imagining how clever they were. HR probably thought they'd handled everything cleanly too. But by Monday morning, the paperwork was filed. Injunctions against the restructuring, board meeting notices, and motions for breach of fiduciary duty. When I walked back into the office that day, it wasn't with a cardboard box. It was with a folder under my arm, the kind that changes lives. And the fun was just about to begin. Chapter 3. The Boardroom Showdown. The boardroom smelled faintly of cologne and expensive coffee, the kind of place where decisions worth millions were made. My wife and her boyfriend sat side by side, smug and relaxed, thinking this meeting was just a formality to confirm my exit. HR hovered nervously in the corner, clutching folders. I entered quietly, not with bitterness, not with rage, but with the calm authority of a man holding all the cards. The smug beginning. My wife leaned back in her chair, voice dripping with arrogance. "Oh, Liam, here to say your goodbyes. Don't worry, we'll make sure your transition is smooth." Her boyfriend chuckled. "Relax, man. Corporate life isn't for everyone." The board shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension. The twist. I placed a thick folder on the table and slid copies to each executive. Actually, I'm here to discuss breach of fiduciary duty and illegal restructuring. My wife's smile faltered. Her boyfriend frowned. I turned to the board. As you can see in Section 12 of the company's bylaws, no restructuring of an executive role may proceed without the approval of all founding shareholders. As of last Friday, an attempt was made to remove me without consent in direct violation of those bylaws. The CFO flipped through the pages, his eyes widening. HR looked like they wanted to melt into the wall. The tables turn. I leaned forward, my voice steady. As a result, I have filed for an injunction. Effective immediately, the restructuring is void, and all decisions made since are suspended. Furthermore, I am calling for a vote to remove individuals who acted in bad faith, including those who conspired to replace me. Gasps rippled through the room. My wife went pale, her boyfriend's smirk collapsing into panic. The moment of humiliation. The chair of the board cleared his throat. Mr. Collins is correct. This was an unlawful action, effective immediately. The so-called restructuring is reversed. Liam remains in full authority. He turned to my wife and her lover. As for you two, you've embarrassed this company. You'll be hearing from our legal department. The room buzzed. Some executives shook my hand. Others shot disgusted glances at my wife. Cameras from corporate communications there to record the transition had caught everything. And just like that, the predators had become prey in front of every shareholder. Chapter 4. Stripping them bare. The silence in the boardroom lingered even after the decision was made. My wife and her boyfriend still sat there white-knuckled while the board shuffled out, some throwing them looks of contempt, others whispering in disbelief. But this was only the beginning. Financial revenge. The next step was clean and surgical. Using my position and founder's rights, I ordered a full audit of expenses over the last year. The forensic accountants didn't have to look long. My wife and her boyfriend had siphoned company funds for business trips, five-star hotels, and lavish dinners. The numbers didn't just prove misconduct. They screamed embezzlement. I froze their corporate cards, revoked access to accounts, and placed both under internal investigation. Overnight, their financial lifelines vanished. Social exposure. Of course, it wasn't just about money. The company's communications team had recorded the transition meeting, expecting to use it for a PR announcement. Instead, that footage, my wife smugly declaring her boyfriend was replacing me, then the board reversing it and shaming them, was leaked. By Tuesday, it was everywhere. CEO's wife and lover attempt hostile takeover fail spectacularly. Her phone, once buzzing with invitations and adoration, was now filled with silence. Their friends vanished. Their reputations turned to ash. The emotional gut punch. That night, when she tried to corner me at home, her voice was desperate. "Liam, you don't understand. It was just business. We can fix this." I looked at her, the same woman who had tried to erase me in front of everyone. And I said quietly, almost kindly, "Number, you fired me. Remember? You told me to clear out by Friday. Well, now it's your turn. Get out of my house." She froze. Tears welled up, but I didn't budge. For once, she understood. Her power was gone. Her lover couldn't protect her, and I wasn't the man she thought she could control. Epilogue. 6 months later. Her fall. My wife, once the queen of boardroom parties and charity galas, was now a ghost. Her name was mud in every corporate circle, whispered with disdain. The woman who tried to steal a company with her boyfriend. Her so-called lover hadn't lasted either. Under the pressure of audits and lawsuits, he'd turned on her, cutting a deal to save himself. She spent her days in a rented apartment, fighting legal fees with no allies, no access to corporate accounts, and no family willing to pick up her calls. The same people who used to admire her wouldn't touch her with a 10ft pole. Your rise. Meanwhile, I thrived. With them out of the picture, I steered the company into its strongest year yet. A record-breaking quarter that secured my legacy as the true visionary behind its success. Shareholders praised my leadership, employees respected me more than ever, and industry magazines ran headlines like, "The CEO who survived a coup and came back stronger." At home, life was quieter, but richer. I wasn't weighed down by betrayal anymore. My children stood firmly by me, proud of the man who had faced humiliation, endured it, and turned it into triumph. The poetic closure. The last time I saw her, she was outside the courthouse, begging a reporter not to take her picture. Our eyes met across the crowd, and for just a second, I saw her realize the truth. She had fired me from her life. But in the end, she was the one erased. I turned, stepped into my car, and didn't look back. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't shouting, "I won." It's living so well that the people who tried to destroy you can't even imagine your world anymore.